to see how we could help the Mars Society ship parts for the habitat up to the Arctic. I looked to the Marines for help. The Marines were able to successfully deliver the bulk and the most important components of the habitat.
You got to figure that the C-130 is rolling by about 150 knots, and pulling those chutes out with the size of the load and with these winds, bringing it down in this kind of area is a real challenge.
A paradrop is always an adventure. You are, after all, throwing something out the door of an airplane and hoping that it will be successfully delivered to the ground while using a parachute that is meant to bring it down quickly.
Down there in a seat.
Number 1 went well, number 2 went well, number 3 went well. One load drifted a little bit in the wind and landed on the slope, but all the parts were safe.
Roger, we're continuing 15 to 20 knots at 015. With the winds right now, we're kind of pushing the limit. We're about 15 knots, and we got a limit of about 17.
Standing over there, I saw it roll when it hit the ground. I really had some doubts coming over here. I thought I was going to see something really ugly, but it looks pretty good.
This was a very successful delivery until we got to the very last paradrop of that day, paradrop number 7. My immediate reaction was, uh-oh.
The 7th paradrop was a total disaster. The payload separated from the chute at an altitude of 1,000 feet, and it crashed into the ground at several hundred miles an hour, completely destroying the floors for the habitat, the fiberglass floors, the trailer that we had shipped to the Arctic in order to be able to move things that we thought might land wide, and the crane that was needed to erect the heavy and big habitat walls was destroyed. I got on the phone. I started calling all over Canada to try to locate alternative resources. I looked into everything. I looked into using helicopters.
Trying to make a fix in the field and trying to rush and to try to force things is going to just make things worse. And eventually somebody will get maimed or killed. I'm not here to push you guys to do anything. Okay? I'm just here to hear you guys tell me what, in your professional opinions, is possible for the season or not possible.
The construction team decides to postpone building the habitat until the next summer. They clean up the debris and purchase tickets to leave from the nearest airport, 200 miles away on another island.
When I got off the plane in Resolute last year, the situation here was really grim. I was greeted directly at the airport by the leader of the first construction crew, who handed me an ultimatum. They weren't committed to the project. It wasn't important to them. It was just a job. At the first sign of adversity, they were willing to quit.
I'm finished talking about it. I am so irritated with the things that you said in your email, that you had the audacity to say the things that you did. I am not quitting. Yes, because you're trying to make an unsafe things like some of the other things that you've done, the projects that you've done.
You're just a consultant to the Mars Society. They're not We had no trailer, we had no crane, and we had no crew, and completely demoralized situation here at camp, and it had to be turned around.
Things only begin to change 1 week after the accident, when Zubrin gets out to Devon Island with a new construction leader.
If we're going to go to Mars, we're going to have to take risks.
This is actually a very serious matter. Hurting somebody could not only stop this project really forever. If somebody gets killed, maimed, this is gonna, I will stop the project for one thing.
That adds extra strength.
Pascal and I, actually the very first time that I met him on the island, I think his words were, "You aren't supposed to be here," and he just turned around and walked away from me. And I'm not used to having people be that rude to me. I mean, on a construction job, I probably would have smacked him in the nose.
This is basically 6 5-foot sections at 30 feet.
And
Frank's role was just very much unclear in my mind, at least.
Horizontal braces.
I had no idea about his background, about how qualified he was as a construction manager and an architect. We just simply didn't know each other.
Basically, somewhere in that floor, you've got the airlock that's built like
After
that.
debating many alternatives for erecting the habitat, they zero in on a solution that Pascal thinks is safe.
And this, right on the...
This sounds like a reasonable solution.
Okay. Well, let's also have them bring over the trailer. On the first human mission to Mars, plenty of things are going to go wrong. We're going into a totally unknown environment. But if you send the right kind of crew, you're not sending robots, you're sending people. And they're going to find a way out of it. We took parts of a wrecked baggage cart from Resolute Airport. We strung them together with some 2x4s. We made a big trailer, and we were able to move these huge wall panels from hundreds of yards away down the crater slope, bring it all here where they could be built. We had to balance the panels on it and like a kind of a rickshaw and roll them around. Success!
We used parts of the crane that got smashed and sort of jury-rigged it and bolted and glued it together. Created our own winch and pulley system.
We've moved the pieces in place. We're ready to go. We think we have an alternative construction technique to erecting the walls. We're going to build the floors out of wood instead of fiberglass. Where there's a will, there's a way.
1, 2, 3, lift.
Now, we may or may not succeed, okay? But we're not going to fail for lack of trying.
Keep going. Okay, on the count of 3, we're going to lift. 1, 2, 3.
The plan was to put 2 panels together and then put a leg on it and then to tip it up onto the leg.
Man the ropes.
Using guy ropes and a winch to lift it up. You know, you kind of just tip it up from one end to the other.
Go ahead, John. What do you think, John?
When the first panel went up, there was a lot of excitement around me. But I sort of was standing there with my arms crossed going, I don't like this. There's something wrong here. It doesn't seem. It seems too complicated, number one, and number two, it's way too heavy to be lifting by hand. You know, we had 6 or 7 people underneath it at one point for maybe 10 or 15 seconds, and I was scared to death of that. Because if the panel ever went, I mean, if it even touched someone, it would smash them. So, while everybody else was jumping up and down saying, oh boy, we did it, I was thinking to myself, this isn't good.
Right now, things are going very well. The habitat is being erected. This is for the Mars Society, at least, a historic moment. My concern still at this time is that we proceed with everything we can to keep this operation safe.
On 3, 1, 2, 3.
Go! Lift! Lift! Lift!
As we lifted it up,
Keep
the
lifting.
second panel hit the guy wires that was holding the first panel. And right at that moment, the wind caught it. And that's how it crashed.
Got a little out of control once the belaying line from that side was slacked in. Gotta take it a lot more carefully.
God, I kind of went, oh my God, oh no. And I remember I just sat on it and put my head in my hands and went, oh, this is it. But I knew that if I lost confidence that the whole thing would sink. So I just I let myself wallow in the bad feelings for about 2 minutes and then jumped up and said, okay, let's start on the next one. There's a lot of good ideas that don't work. And so you kind of have to go through those.
I think we're learning what we're doing, and it's getting easier, it's getting faster, it's going to get safer.
It's going to be pretty. The new plan was to take the two sections apart and put the panels up one at a time, which would reduce the weight that we were lifting from 2,000 pounds to 800 pounds, and build a platform for that panel to rest on to bring it up to the right height. And then as we went around and got two panels up, we would put the leg on in place while the other panels were standing up.
So we would just go around the structure. Okay, attach a wall, another wall, then a leg, then a wall, a leg, wall, leg, and just keep going round and round until we finally got it all around. When we got the thing around, it didn't fit. The 12 wall panels were up, and there was a 1 foot gap between the 12th panel and the first panel. We put a come-along around the entire cylinder and squeezed it together into place.
Difficulties were overcome and challenges were met. And the next thing you know, after 12 days of round-the-clock work, using the benefit of the midnight sun, all of a sudden we had a spaceship. We had a lander sitting on the rim of Halton Crater. It was just an incredible sight.
The situation we were in is very close, I think, to what might happen on Mars to a crew, where they have something crash, something happen that they totally didn't expect, and they have to improvise and sort of wing it.
There's no question in my mind that this thing was successful by a combination of sheer will, but also of luck.
What we've had to do is think of alternative solutions, of how to put things together with different pieces that were meant for something else and make it work.
It's day 4 in the Devon Island Mars simulation, and Robert Zubrin is beginning a 1-week rotation as commander of the second crew. He comes with high hopes that this whole exercise will help us get to Mars soon.
I've been interested in space exploration and the challenge of human exploration and settlement of Mars ever since I was a very small boy. I want to get a taste. I want to know, to the extent that it's possible to know, what it's going to feel like to be in that crew on Mars. The larger experiment that's going on here is the dynamics of a crew operating under simulation conditions. Having to obey simulation constraints places the crew under certain kind of stresses.
The suit was quite, I would say, bulky, but that's exactly the purpose of the simulation. So you cannot do whatever movement you would like to do. You're not completely free. My name is Vladimir Plets. I work as a physicist engineer at the Technical Center of the European Space Agency. It's located in Holland. I got involved in this simulation campaign because I truly believe that mankind's destiny would be to move out of the planet Earth and start to colonize and live in cities in orbit and on other worlds.
It's a typical early morning in the habitat, and like on a real Mars mission, the crew is monitoring the weather.
Okay, so here it is as 6:45 Mountain Time. Rain is forecast for tonight and Friday. Brisk easterly winds can be expected.
Outside, it's like a foul Martian day. Imagine dust clouds instead of drizzle. But Zubrin's crew is determined to test some equipment that could help find water on the bone-dry surface of Mars.
We're going to try to deploy Vladimir's experiment, if possible, in its full glory.
We need to assess what type of ground. We need to have good contacts. One of the things which is most important now in Mars research is the detection of water. Can we find water anywhere on Mars? Liquid water. We know that there is some ice in the polar caps. We suspect that there might be some ice stuck into rocks just below the surface. Where is it possible to find liquid water below the surface of Mars? Do you want me to stand up?
As the crew dons their EVA suits, detailed observations are made of every step in the procedure. The hope is to get a clear idea of how long things will take and where the problems will be on a real Mars mission. In this crew, Bill Clancy, armed with a notepad, is in charge of recording all the observations.
Okay, so 11:15 and Zubrin is getting his helmet fitted.
It takes almost an hour for the crew members to put on their EVA suits and get into the simulated airlock. On a real mission, astronauts will have to pass through such a chamber routinely to transition into the low-pressure atmosphere of Mars. For Vladimir, stepping out onto simulated Mars to practice looking for water strikes a chord of destiny.
I think it's really written into our human gene that we are born to explore, we are born to move. It's for sure the next step of mankind would be Mars.
The process that we're going here can allow one to imagine that they're on another planet. The scenery is certainly unearthly. The routine that we're in is extraordinary. And certainly when you're out on EVA and in the EVA suit and you're isolated from the environment.
I have something in my eye that's starting to bug me.
You get the feel for how much work an EVA is. It underlines the fact that human exploration on Mars is going to be a physical activity.
Yeah, Robert, you need to go another 3 meters. Okay.
What we're doing is we're laying out a seismic array that can be used to sound underground for water, which is of enormous interest to future Mars explorers. Underground water is where we might be able to find life on Mars and sample it, learn its structure. Underground water would be a tremendous resource for a Mars base or a Mars settlement. This is exactly what astronauts might do on Mars.
All along the cable, the crew must push special microphones, called geophones, into the hard, rocky ground.
Not the best terrain to do it, but I guess the first human crew on Mars would have to face this kind of problem as well. So we better try to learn how this thing works here on Earth before to do it on Mars.
On the first real mission, astronauts will have to bring along all the water they need and recycle it again and again. But if their geophones pick up a local source of underground water, the cost of future missions could go way down. Based on the crew's experience today, the seismic technology will need modification. It's tough handling things with thick gloves and hard to see displays when there are so many reflections.
See the thing on. So now we press enter.
Now it says measure, then it says record log.
Okay, if you want.
The way this works is we put these sensors out and then we send sound signals into the ground with a sledgehammer. Can you see it? And the sound goes down into the ground. And when it comes across different layers with different sound conductance, some of it penetrates, others reflects back. And so you get a series of reflections telling you about the different layers underground.
Could be rock, could be granite, could be water, could be anything. We will see.
We proceed now with test 3 at the other extremity, over.
The crew re-enters the habitat through the airlock after working to the supposed limit of their oxygen supply. While the seismic data didn't reveal any water pockets, the EVA was a rich learning experience.
Oh! Something I wanted to do since the beginning, scratching here.
It was exhausting, frustrating, like reeling up that cable that the geophones were attached to. Just getting caught on rocks. Anything that you had to bend down to do was very tiring.
The main technical problem that we actually had that was a potential showstopper was the screen was not bright enough. Given the impairment in visibility due to the spacesuits and the drizzle. Now on Mars there won't be drizzle, but there'll be dust. And your helmet can mist up still on the inside because it's cold outside. And that field instruments need to have big, bright, clear displays. Big buttons, big displays. I mean, we're talking here about kindergarten type displays.
The Arctic habitat is even giving social scientists a chance to help us get to Mars.
My name is Bill Clancy. I work at NASA Ames Research Center. There I'm a computer scientist and I run a group called Work System Design and Evaluation, where we're helping NASA design its operations and advanced technologies. I think the simplest way to explain what I'm trying to learn by being in this simulation is how people use the space in the Hab. I could start, say, on the first day, and I could notice that the table, for example, our wardroom table, was placed differently when we first came in. And someone pushed it back a little bit because it was too close for their chairs. Other people had to move it from one side because you couldn't pass on one side. So it has now reached a stable position. Now we could measure how far is that table from the wall, how much space is on each side. Now you're in a position that you can say, this space fits. Well, one thing that I will try to observe systematically and document is the whole preparation for the sim. So putting on the suits and how long that takes. People start waking up between 7 and 7:30. Breakfast is complete by 9.
Trinity is here.
I'm sorry, I'm getting confused.
We have a briefing and planning meeting.
I think it'll be dry enough all the way out to here.
10:30 we're starting to suit up. There were 3 days that we started suiting up between 5 minutes of 10:30. Nobody said it should be 10:30. That pattern just developed, and that's what I'm looking for. I have a special perspective to bring, which is a form of science that is focused on the people and the habitat and the operations, as opposed to being focused on the crater, the rocks, and the life. So you have scientists studying the crater, and I'm studying the scientists. Having people living and working here, it isn't just a theory. We're able to watch it in context and get a sense of what people need and what they prefer to do.
Studying how people use this habitat should help in designing the actual spaceship that ultimately takes humans to Mars. And watching how crews organize their time and interact with one another should help in planning schedules and procedures on a real Mars mission.
Bon appétit.
The forecast has just arrived from the Canadian Arctic Weather Service. Cloudy with a few showers. Winds light. High of 6 centigrade.
It's day 10 in the Mars simulation, the last day for crew number 2. Off and on rain all week, very unusual in the Devon Island desert, has repeatedly delayed the second deployment of Vladimir's seismic instruments.
1, 2, 3.
Now the crew has run out of time, so despite the bad weather, they're heading into Devon Island's meteor impact crater to look for underground water.
The instruments that we are using is basically 3 huge boxes. A total combined weight is 130 kilos. We had to carry these 130 kilos on the trailer, in the crater and in the mud and so on. We had good hope that we could do it, but good fate was not with us today.
The crew had not surveyed their route ahead of time, and 2 miles from the habitat, there's a nasty surprise.
The 3 of us believe that the ATVs will not be strong enough. We can't even stand anywhere near it anymore. We're sinking in up to our knees. Over.
On Mars there's no mud and liquid water, but a similar sort of thing can happen in dunes, sand dunes in Martian deserts. If you got really stuck in a sand dune on Mars, let's say with a vehicle and a trailer, you'd be in real trouble, possibly a terminal EVA on Mars.